Example, now you want to create a field. Step number 1, choose the data type. Step number 2, enter the field name. Step number 3, field level visibility. Step number 4, add to the field. You want to create a workflow rule. Step number 1, choose the object. Step number 2, workflow name. Step number 3, okay, evaluation criteria, workflow rule. Step number 4, actions. So what is this sequence of steps? When you have a sequence of steps, then we go for a flow. Why don't we build using a visual force page? We can also build sequence of steps using visual force page. But the problem is, if I want to transfer the data from one page to another page, I can do it. But when you have a sequence of steps, the data which is in the first page, I want to use in the 10th page. Then how will you transfer the data? The data which is in the first page, I want to use in the 4th page. How will you transfer the data? It is becoming more complex. When there is a sequence of steps involved, when you want to transfer the data, then it becomes more complex. Instead of that, Salesforce has given a visual flow concept. What is the concept here? Visual flows. In this, we are able to build the pages with a drag and drop model. Till now, whatever the pages we are building these pages using what? Till now, whatever the pages we are building the pages using what? Visual force page. Now, Salesforce has given a concept called visual flow, using which I can build the pages using a drag and drop model. I can build the pages using drag and drop model. Let us see that. We have setup, build, create, workflows and approvals. What we have here? Create, workflows and approvals, close, new flow. Here I was trying to build a page. Choose the screen, drag and drop. I give a page name. So what we have here? Add. I give a page name here. Along with the page name I gave. Okay, add the field. Now we are running. Last thing. You want to make it required, you can make it required. You want to apply validation, we can write a validation rule. Then screen number 2. Let's ask. One more. Third page. Then I'm giving a pick list.
So here the page means it is a new screen. Yeah.
Come again. You can give anything of your choice.
No, when we say new page, it is a new screen, right?
Exactly. It's a screen. What I selected is a screen.
Yeah. Okay.
So what was that? I created a multiple screens. Each page is one screen. Sequence of steps, like a flow chart I gave like in this, the final screen. Display text. Name. You choose here input screens. From the input page, what all the things you entered? First name. So I was able to use the data. I was able to use the data from any page. In this sequence, from any screen I can take the data and use it. Right. Now, whichever the screen you want to make it as a first screen, click on green button. When you click on the green button, it becomes the first screen. See? Now, you go to the developer console. I want to use them. So, how to use it? Flow, finish location, invoke the flow, and give the first name, last name. Click on next. 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 This is how we are providing the data. Right, boss? So what I'm doing? It is a sequence of steps. When you have a sequence of steps, when you want to go in a particular order, we have a sequence of steps which need to be executed in a particular order. We are building them using a flows. We can also build this using a visual force. But data that is entered in the screen number 1, if I want to take it to the screen number 4, it takes a lot of complex work. Now we are able to build with the pages. We are able to build a sequence of steps very easily with the visual flows. So this is the advantage of going for a flows. We are able to build the pages using a drag and drop very easily. But the problem here is we are able to build it very easily. But the problem here is we cannot write a logic in the flows. You cannot make a calculation in the flows. We cannot write a logics. We cannot write a flow. We cannot write a logics. We cannot write a calculation. No logics and calculations are accepted in the flow. But if you want to go for a calculations or a logic, what will it do? We require a flow because sequence of steps can be built very easily. We require a flow because the sequence of steps can be built very easily. But the problem is no logics are accepted. So if you want to perform any logics in the flow, we are going for a plugins. We had a plugin. What is a plugin? It is a predefined interface. It is a predefined interface in the Salesforce. This is a defined under the namespace of process. Any class you want to use as plugin in the flows, any Apex class that should any Apex class you want to use as plugin in the flow should be implement it. Any Apex class you want to use as plugin in the flows that should implement plugin interface. If the Apex class is implementing plugin interface, then it should define two methods. First one is invoke method. Describe method. If the Apex class is implementing plugin interface, then it should define two methods. Invoke method. Second one is describe method. Then it should define two methods: invoke method and a describe method. This will contain the logics. Syntax. This is the syntax. Describe method. This will give description about input parameters, used in the syntax. So if a Apex class want to, if you want to use any Apex class in the flows. If you want any Apex class to be used in the flows, if you want any Apex class to be used in the flows, if you want any Apex class, if you want any Apex class to be used, if you want any Apex class to be used in the flows, it should implement an interface called plugin. It should implement an interface called plugin. It should implement an interface called plugin. If you want any Apex class to be used in the flows, then the flow has to invoke a Apex class that implements process.plugin interface. Again, I repeat, if you want any Apex class to be used in the flows, that class has to implement process.plugin interface. If a class is implementing process.plugin interface, it has to define two methods: invoke method, describe method. Invoke method contains logic that you want to implement. Describe method contains inputs and outputs, what we are using, and the data types and their description. The data types and description. Right. Let us go to next one. Let us go to the next one. What we are doing? Process.plugin request. What is this process.plugin request? Right. Plugin request. It is a predefined. It is a predefined Apex class. This class will contain all the input parameters given by flow. This is predefined Apex class. This class will contain all the input parameters are given by flow to the plugin. Whatever the parameters the flow is giving to the plugin, whatever the parameters flow is given to the plugin, those are available in plugin request class. So let me show you here. I have a flow here. My requirement is, let us say, this is a flow. From flow, I am invoking a plugin. Now, whatever the data, whether is available in the flow, if you want to send it to a plugin, it should be in what? So what we are sending? The input parameters, what you want to send, that we are sending. If I give a value, b value. If you are sending a value, b value, whereas the data, that is in process.plugin request. How it is available in this process.plugin request? Whatever the request you are making, that request is going to process.plugin request. Whatever the data we are sending from flow to the plugin, that will be sent to the process.plugin request. In the process.plugin request, we have map of string comma object input parameter. So the parameters what you are passing, they are stored in input parameters in the process.plugin request. In the process.plugin request class, we have a variable called input parameters. That variable contains all the inputs what you have sent from the flow to the plugin in the form of map. From flow, whatever the data we are sending, from flow, whatever the data we are sending, from the flow, whatever the data we are sending, the data is sent to the plugin in the form of process.plugin request. Process.plugin request is a class which will contain all the input parameters what you sent. Now, the input parameters what you sent, they are available in what? Input parameters. What is this input parameters? It is a map. How do you get the value from a map? Input parameters dot get of key. If I give a key, we get a value. Again, I am repeating. From flow, whatever the data you are sending to the plugin, that is available in the class of process.plugin request class. In that class, we have a variable called input parameters, which is a form of map. So whatever the data you are sending, the data is stored in the form of map, right? Where name of the parameter is the key and the type of the parameter is the value. Now, what is the value of the parameter? That is the value in the map. Key value pair. Key value pair. Right. Let us take the next step. Now, process.plugin request will make a logic and it will give you output. Whatever the output it want to give, it will put in the form of map. While receiving it, it will receive like a map. While sending also, it will send like a map. It will create a map, put the map in the process.plugin result, send back this. So whatever the result you want to send, put it in the form of map and send process.plugin. So what was that? Process.plugin request, process.plugin result. Process.plugin request will contain all the input parameters given from the flow to the plugin. Process.plugin result will contain all the output parameters which you are sending from plugin to the flow. I hope you are clear. Flow to plugin, plugin to flow. Input parameters. This all. If you want to use it, how do you use it? First, I have to create. Then we have request.get input parameters. It is in the form of object, right? We need to convert back into string. Decimal salary equal to. Why I am typecasting? Because it is in the form of object. I cannot use in the form of object. I am typecasting and using it. EMP name, So plugin request. Plugin request will contain input parameters. From the plugin request, if you want to use it, we are taking the values in this format. Right, next. Then we have process.plugin. Process.plugin result. Process.plugin result. So what is this process.plugin result? It is predefined text class. Class will contain all the input parameters, all the output parameters given from plugin to public class. Public class plugin, public class plugin result. Public class plugin result.
Hello sir, this plugin request and plugin result both will be in different classes.
Yes, obviously. They are different classes, but we are going to use in the single example. Right, let us go to the next step. So what we are going to do, this will contain public map of string object, public map of string comma object. Right. So this is what we had. So let us go with this. Now how do you use it? I have to create map of string comma object. Then we have then put process dot plugin result. Plugin result. Process dot plugin result. Result equal to new process dot plugin result. Process dot plugin result. Result equal to new process dot plugin result. This is how we are doing. Process process dot plugin result equal to new process dot plugin result. So this is how we are going to send the output to the external system. So process dot plugin request will take the input from the flow. Process dot plugin result will give output to the flow. So let us go to the next one. What is the third class we had? We had one more class. Next one. Process dot plugin describe. This is a predefined effects class. This class is defined under the namespace of this class will define properties of input parameters This class will define properties of input parameters and output parameters used in the class. This class will define properties of input parameters and output parameters used in the class. So syntax. No problem. So this is the class what we have. So we need to define input parameters and output parameters clearly. First, listen carefully, boss. Very carefully listen how to define input parameter. Look at this. Process dot process dot plugin describe result dot input parameter. Process dot plugin describe result dot input parameter param1, param2, param3. What is parameter 1? Name of the input parameter. What is param2? Type of the input parameter. When you say type of the input parameter, how you define? Process dot plugin describe process dot plugin describe result dot parameter. So it is going to specify type of parameter. Required or not required. So when you want to define any input parameter, name of the input parameter, type of the input parameter, is it a required or not required? Input parameter. Parameter name, type of parameter, true or false. Process dot plugin describe result. Input parameter IP2 equal to new process dot plugin describe result dot input parameter salary. Then process dot plugin describe result dot parameter type dot decimal. We are defining the input parameter. Output parameter. Process dot plugin describe result dot output parameter. So how you define the output parameter? Output parameter 1, output parameter 2. Process dot plugin describe result dot output parameter. Parameter 1, parameter 2. Parameter 1, type of parameter. Param 1, name of parameter. Param 2, type of parameter. Param 1, name of parameter. Param 2, type of parameter. Process dot again describe result dot output parameter. Param 1, name of parameter. Param 2, type of parameter. Name 1, param 1, name of the parameter. Param 2, type of the parameter. So how are you defining now? Process dot begin describe. Output parameter. Parameter 2, process dot begin describe result. Output parameter. Right. So here there is no boolean value because it's output. Because it's an output, by default it is required. So let us see this. Now we have given the output parameter. So we need to use all these classes and build our requirement. process dot plugin request, process dot plugin result, process dot describe, okay, describe result, process dot describe result, okay, process dot describe result, okay, process dot plugin describe result dot input parameter, output parameter, all the classes whatever we used, we need to use all of them, form your logic. How do you form your logic? Look at the structure. I am trying to build the logic. Look at this. First, class has to implement what? First, class has to implement process dot. Class has to implement an interface called process dot plugin. Then, if you are implementing this, what are the two methods we need to write? Process dot plugin result, invoke process dot plugin. So I'm going to give process dot. Similarly, what is the next one we had? Public plugin describe result. So this is the basic structure. Now the basic structure. Class is supposed to implement what? Apex class, which is used as is used as plugin in the flow, has to implement invoke method, will take the input parameters from the flow and give output to the flow. So again request as input parameter. Plugin request, it has input parameters. Plugin request, it has input parameter. Plugin result, it has output parameter. Describe. This is a structure in which I have defined. So what is your logic? From the flow you are giving name and age, based on which I am going to calculate salary and bonus. So how to read the name and age? String. How do you read it? request dot name and experience. Name and experience. We're getting both of them. Okay. Request dot input parameters. Then I'm giving a
So this EMP name and EXP we have already created using the
we are
flow.
expecting that these two values are coming from the flow.
Okay.
Then I'm going to create an output parameter. This will map dot put. Right. Then we took the input parameters, we wrote the logic, generated the output. Now we need to give a description about inputs and outputs here. Parameter. Input parameter. What is the other parameter we had? Experience. What type of parameter is that? Parameter type decimal. What is the next one we had? Parameter. Input parameter is done. We are going to go with output parameters. What are the outputs we are giving? process dot plugin describe result dot parameter type this one. So we give input parameters, we give output parameters. There is a lot of support any spelling mistake. Now put all the inputs in one list, put all the outputs in one list. Because we had list of input parameters and list of output parameters. The class has what? List of input parameters, list of output parameters.
Satish, if we override these two methods, means which method will call first?
Now, is there any connection between these two methods? First method is doing what? Logic. So your calculation is always done in the first method only. Second method is telling you what? Okay, your data should be in which format? Your data should be in which format? So it doesn't make a difference whether which is running first. Because logic is only in one method. Logic is not there in two methods. Logic is in one method, description is in other method. So, are they implementing the logics? No. One is implementing the logic, other one is defining what type of. Already the parameters what you are using, their data types are mentioned in the second method. Right, boss?
Yeah, okay, Satish.
Input parameter. List of input parameters. List of input parameters, output parameters. Then the process is done here. Invoke method, writing the logic. Describe method is only giving the description about name of the parameter, type of the parameter, required or not. Output parameter is giving description about name of the parameter, type of the parameter. Put all the inputs in one list, put all the outputs in one list. Now, how you are going to call this in the flow? You are supposed to build a flow and invoke it. Setup, build, create, flows, I was giving the values name, what we got here, begin, drag and drop. Now inputs, EMP name, experience, these are the input. From the flow I am giving the input. We are getting output. What is the output you are getting? bonus and salary. Store the bonus to a variable, create a new variable. Then so this is how we are getting. Make the first screen as home page. For example, go to the Visual Force. For example, giving a structure. Next, so this is how we are getting the value. We are going from the flow to the plugin. In the plugin, we are making a calculation. We are coming to the flow again. So once again, I'll repeat all the procedure. Listen carefully. So this is the flow what I have. In the flow, if I want any calculation to be made, screen 1. From screen 1, I have to go to screen 2. In the screen 2, I was supposed to create. So if I enter the values, click on next, it has to go to screen 2 and print the value of salary and bonus. So what I am doing from screen 1, you are giving from screen 1, you are giving these inputs to plugin. So how are you sending this request? In the form of what? Map of input parameters. Now, this is the plugin. In the plugin, how do you read the data? Tell me. In plugin, name equal to request dot input parameter get off get off. So this is how we got request dot input parameters dot get off. So name and experience. Name and experience. We are reading the value of name and experience. Then make a logic. What is the logic I am creating? Then how I am giving? We are trying to give the next one. How do you give the output? Map of what I have done? Output dot put salary salary. Then process dot plugin this is what I got. So now what I am giving here from the flow I got a plugin request. From the plugin I am sending which is in the form of map of output parameters. This is how we got. This is the basic structure of plugin. So from the flow I have taken okay, from flow I have sent the plugin request to the plugin request in which the input parameters are there. Take the values from the plugin request. Then plugin request, here the variable should be request. Then write the logic. Whatever the output you want to give, put them in a map, put them in a plugin result, send that plugin result to the flow. This is the purpose of invoke method. This is the purpose of invoke method. This method is clear, right? Invoke method is clear. This is clear, right?
I have one question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
For example, when we want to do a deployment of these plugins from sandbox to the production environment,
Okay.
how we will do that, sir?
Include flow and plugin.
Okay.
Now you want to deploy. Now the functionality includes what? He has a question. When you want to deploy, how do you deploy? What are the things that you want to push onto the production flow? And logic is plugin. Both you have to push it. Dependencies has to be deployed. Right. Okay, Nama. Now this is a. Now what is the next one? Describe. What is happening in the describe? Now when you are going for a describe, look at the structure. So tell me how you describe. What are the inputs we have used? Input parameters name and name, experience are input parameters. So how are you defining it? Process dot plugin describe. Input parameter. Input parameter. Process dot plugin describe result dot input parameter. So what is the input parameter we are using? Name is the input parameter. Then type of input parameter what we have is parameter type dot type of parameter. Then true or false. Required. So what is the next parameter we had? Process dot plugin describe result. We had experience. Then we had so input parameters. Now we need to put all the input parameters in a list. List of this is how I give it. Similarly, define the output parameter. How do you define output parameter? Process dot plugin describe result dot output parameter. output parameter. What we had, output is sorry, parameter type dot. Like this we are defining. So this is available in describe method. Now I hope you are clear with this now. Right? Invoke method has a logic, describe method has a description. Right? That's what I agree. Now look at the code. If you have any queries, let me know. We can explain. Right? So the code is simple only. The same word it is repeating number of times. Process dot peg in describe result. If you remove that word, it's only input parameter IP I1 equal to new input parameter. But only the same keyword is repeating number of times. What is that? Look at this. If I remove this, if you remove this, what is the program what we have? Input parameter IP1 equal to new input parameter. Input parameter IP2 equal to new input parameter. Only because we are adding process dot peg and describe result, the program seems to be lengthy. Right? Otherwise, you remove that, it's only input parameter, output parameter. Input parameter, output parameter. Right? So, what is the purpose of flows and plugin? Because when you have a sequence of steps involved, then building the Visual Force pages and transferring the data become a complex process. To avoid that, what people have given, they have given visual flows, using which you can build the page with a drag and drop model. But the problem is you cannot make a calculations in the flows. As you cannot make a calculation, what I was supposed to do? I was supposed to go for plugin. So what is a plugin? It is a interface. Class implementing this interface can be used within the flows. Class implementing this interface can be used in the flows. So if a class implements process.plugin interface, it has to define two methods: invoke method, describe method. Invoke method is for what? Writing the logic. Describe method is for what? Implementing the description about the input parameters and output parameters. Right? Are you clear? Flow is built like flow chart. Okay. Fine. Let us go to the